She walked into that school like any other new student, quiet, eyes low, backpack tight against her shoulders. No flashy entrance, no bold words. Just silence. But sometimes, silence is the loudest warning. In a town where fitting in means fading out, and where the popular kids ruled like royalty, Brielle Davis didn't stand a chance, at least, that's what they thought. She was different, and for them, different meant a target. The jokes started small, the shoves a little harder, the laughter crueler each day. But what no one knew, not the bullies, not the teachers, not even the girl who tried to befriend her, was that Brielle wasn't just holding back tears. She was holding back a storm. A storm built from years of training, discipline, and a promise she once made: never let anyone treat you like you don't matter. So when they crossed the line one final time, they expected a meltdown. What they got was a beatdown. This isn't just a story about bullying. It's a warning. Never mistake quiet for weakness, because the quiet ones are often the most dangerous. Brielle Davis had barely stepped off the bus before she felt it, the weight of 100 unfamiliar eyes. Elmswood wasn't just new, it was a completely different world from the Atlanta neighborhood she'd grown up in. Back home, the streets buzzed with energy, diversity, and a rhythm she understood. But here, in this small, mostly white town tucked behind rows of identical houses and manicured lawns, everything felt still, and quietly judgmental. Her mother had taken a high-level management job at a local biotech company, the kind that came with relocation bonuses and promises of a better life. But for Brielle, it wasn't better. It was just lonelier. She adjusted the strap of her backpack and walked toward the school's glass doors, her braids brushing against her shoulders with each step. Northbridge High stood like a fortress, tall and clean, with banners advertising Spirit Week and championship trophies. As she entered, the hallway noise swelled, a blur of laughter, chatter, lockers slamming shut, sneakers squeaking against the floor. Brielle said nothing. She moved through the crowd like a shadow, her hoodie drawn up just enough to shield her face without seeming too obvious. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to get through the day, unnoticed and unbothered. But Brielle was always watching. In every class, she sat in the back, eyes scanning. She noticed how certain students lit up when others walked in the room. How some teachers seemed to show preference, calling on the same kids repeatedly while ignoring others. She learned quickly who was who. At the top of the food chain was a trio of seniors known across the school as the Crown. The name sounded like a joke, but no one laughed when they passed by. Not out loud, anyway. Logan Ferris was the ringleader. He had that kind of false charm that fooled adults and intimidated everyone else. His hair always looked like it had just been styled, and he walked like he owned the floor beneath his feet. His girlfriend, Tara Milton, wasn't just pretty, she was cold and clever. She had a smile that could cut glass and a voice sharp enough to silence a room. The third was Brett Daniels, built like a football player but with half the intelligence. He didn't talk much, but his presence was enough to make people move out of the way. They walked the halls like royalty, like rules didn't apply to them, and they usually didn't. By the time lunch came around, Brielle's head was throbbing. The noise, the stares, the fake friendliness from teachers trying too hard, it was all exhausting. She headed to the cafeteria and scanned the tables. Most were full of clusters, jocks with jocks, cheerleaders with cheerleaders, quiet kids tucked into their corners. She found an empty table by the windows and sat down, pulling her lunch from her bag. Just as she bit into her sandwich, a shadow fell across the table. "Hey," a soft voice said. She looked up to see a girl with big curls and nervous eyes standing nearby, tray in hand. "Can I sit here? You look like you're on an island." Brielle hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." The girl sat down quickly and smiled. "I'm Mia. You're new, right?" "Yeah. First day." "I thought so. I saw you in English this morning." Mia's voice was kind but cautious, like she was testing the waters. "Where are you from?" "Atlanta." "Oh wow, big change. You probably think this place is boring." Brielle offered a tiny smirk. "You're not wrong." They were just beginning to warm up when the entire atmosphere shifted. The volume of the cafeteria seemed to lower all at once. Heads turned. Whispers rippled. Mia glanced toward the main entrance and sighed. Oh. Brielle followed her gaze. The crown had arrived. Logan led the way, slinging his bag over one shoulder, Tara beside him in a pristine white sweater, Brett trailing just behind. They made a beeline for the center of the cafeteria, not caring who they had to move or brush past. People either looked down or stared too long, both reactions feeding their egos. Then Logan's eyes locked on Brielle. He changed direction immediately, smirking as he approached her table. Tara followed, curious. Brett cracked his knuckles out of habit. "Hey, new girl," Logan said loudly, drawing even more attention. "We don't sit at that table." Brielle blinked at him, not understanding or pretending not to. He nodded toward the window behind her. "That's our table's view. You're blocking the vibe." A few students nearby chuckled. Tara leaned in with mock sweetness. "Didn't anyone explain the rules to you yet?" Mia shrank in her seat. "Don't say anything," she muttered to Brielle. But Brielle didn't respond, not to Mia, not to Logan. She simply stood up, picked up her tray, and walked to a smaller table closer to the back. No anger. No fear. Just silence. Logan raised an eyebrow, thrown off for a moment. "Well, that was easy," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Didn't even bark. More laughter. But not everyone was laughing. A few students glanced at Brielle curiously, noting how calm she looked. No flush of embarrassment. No flustered motions. She sat down at the new table, unfolded her sandwich again, and continued eating. Mia hesitated, then got up and moved to sit beside her. "They're always like that," she whispered. "They don't care who you are. If you don't kiss up to them, you're a target." "I've seen worse," Brielle replied quietly. Mia frowned. "You didn't even react." Brielle looked at her, her gaze steady. "That's how they lose interest." But that wasn't entirely true. Brielle wasn't avoiding conflict. She was measuring it. The crown thought she was just another new girl. Quiet. Easy to break. But what they didn't know was that Brielle had already decided how this would end. And it wouldn't be in their favor. The days turned into weeks, and the so-called fresh start began to rot. Brielle Davis moved through Northbridge High like a ghost, silent, watchful, calculating. She kept her grades up, took her lunch with Mia when she could, and walked home alone. But there was no real peace. Not with the crown circling like vultures. It started small, Logan brushing past her in the hallway, just hard enough to knock her shoulder and mutter, "Watch it." Tara whispering behind her in chemistry class, "Wonder how long it takes for braids like that." Hours of trying too hard. Brett, in gym, always laughing too loud whenever someone tripped near her, mimicking her Atlanta drawl and exaggerating it like a cartoon. Each day, Brielle chose silence. Each day, they saw it as submission. Only Mia really noticed the cracks forming in Brielle's stillness. They'd meet at lunch, and Mia would whisper updates about what rumor the crown was spreading now or who they'd turned on lately. One day, after another round of mockery in the hallway, Mia leaned in and said with a frustrated sigh, "You know, if you just do something, anything, they back off. They're just noise, Brielle. They feed off attention." Brielle stared at her tray for a moment, then lifted her eyes and gave a half-smile. "I've dealt with worse." Mia blinked. "Worse than them?" Brielle nodded once. "Trust me." That trust was tested during gym class on a cold Wednesday afternoon. The class had been split into teams for a round of dodgeball, the kind where nobody played fair and everyone turned savage once the ball started flying. Coach Ross, an aging man with a whistle who seemed more interested in his phone than his students, barely looked up as the teams were sorted. Brielle kept to the back of her team, avoiding the chaos. But Brett noticed. And when Brett noticed, Logan noticed. That's how it always went. The game began, and balls flew through the air like missiles. Brielle ducked one, sidestepped another, doing what she always did, survive quietly. But Brett had other plans. "Yo, Logan. Brett called out, grinning. Watch this. Brielle turned her head just in time to see Brett, face flushed with excitement, cock his arm back and launch a dodgeball with full force. It spun through the air like a cannonball and struck her square in the side of the head. The sound was sickening. The gym fell silent for half a second. Then came the laughter. Logan howled, slapping his leg. Tara doubled over, tears in her eyes from laughing so hard. Brett pumped his fists like he'd scored a touchdown. Brielle's body hit the floor with a thud. Her braids splayed across the gym mat, and for a second, even Mia thought she wouldn't get up. But she did. Slowly. Deliberately. Her hand pressed against the floor as she lifted herself upright. She brushed her hair from her face, not even bothering to look at Coach Ross, who stood frozen at the far end of the gym, mouth open, doing absolutely nothing. Brielle's expression didn't change. But her eyes. They were no longer the eyes of someone who was choosing peace. They were the eyes of someone who was calculating payback. Mia ran over, helping her up. Are you okay? I'm fine, Brielle said flatly. You should tell Coach. That was on purpose. Brielle didn't even glance at him. He saw. And did nothing. Mia didn't know what to say. No one had ever stood up to the crown and walked away clean. They owned the narrative in this school. You spoke out, you became a bigger target. But something told Mia that Brielle wasn't afraid of becoming a target. She might have been the target. But now she was something else. The next day, it got quiet. Brielle didn't talk about the dodgeball incident. She didn't flinch when Logan whistled at her in the hallway or when Tara pretended to gag when Brielle passed her locker. But the calmness was different now. It wasn't passive. It wasn't surrender. It was coiled. The kind of calm a boxer has right before the bell. Mia noticed it first. The way Brielle looked at the gym door a little longer during lunch. The way her eyes followed Coach Ross when he passed her in the hallway. The way she stopped pretending to hide. The crowd didn't notice. They never did until it was too late. That Friday, Brett bumped into Brielle again outside the science wing. Oops, he said with a smug grin. Didn't see you, Southern Belle. Brielle stepped aside without saying a word. But this time, she smiled. Not a small, tight smile like before. A smile that meant something was coming. And this time, when she walked away, Brett didn't feel like he'd won. He looked around, confused, as if trying to figure out what he missed. But he wouldn't get it until later. None of them would. Because the quiet girl who didn't react? She was done reacting. Now it was her turn. By Monday morning, the halls of Northbridge High buzzed like a beehive disturbed. No one said it directly to Brielle, but she could feel the shift to whispers trailing behind her like smoke, eyes flicking toward her and then quickly away. Something had changed. It started with a rumor. A freshman girl from her math class claimed she overheard a conversation in the office, something about Davis from Atlanta and disciplinary concerns. Another kid on the basketball team swore he'd seen an old article online about a youth boxing champion with the same name. The story twisted and grew with every telling. Some said Brielle had knocked out a boy twice her size back home. Others said her father trained professional MMA fighters, that she'd grown up in a ring and could break a nose in 2 seconds flat. No one knew for sure. And Brielle? She didn't confirm or deny a thing. She kept her head down, as always, walking with a calm, silent confidence that now felt different, heavier. Before, it had seemed like submission. Now, it felt like control. Even Mia was caught off guard. At lunch, she leaned over their usual table and whispered, "Okay, tell me at least some of it's true." Brielle gave her a faint smile. "What do you think?" Mia paused. "I think if I was Logan, I'd start worrying." Across the cafeteria, the crowd sat in their usual spot, but something had changed. Logan's cocky smirk was still there, but it looked tighter. More forced. Tara kept shooting glances at Brielle. Even Brett, who usually radiated dumb confidence, seemed quieter, his jokes landing flatter than usual. They'd heard the rumors too. And Logan hated it. Boxing club, he scoffed to the others. You kidding me? That girl can barely make eye contact. She's faking tough. Still, Brett mumbled. She's got that look now, man. Like she's waiting for something. Logan waved him off. No. She's just trying to scare us. Thinks she can play games. Let's end it. Tara hesitated. Logan. No, he said. Friday. After school. Bike racks. By Friday afternoon, word had spread. Dozens of students lingered around the edges of the courtyard long after the last bell rang, pretending to be checking phones or waiting for rides. The smart ones knew something was about to happen. The smarter ones had already pulled their phones out to film. Brielle walked out of the building as usual, hoodie up, backpack slung over one shoulder. She didn't flinch when she saw them waiting. Logan stepped forward first, hands in his jacket pockets. Tara flanked his left, arms crossed. Brett cracked his knuckles like he was warming up for a show. Hey, Davis, Logan said, his voice light and mocking. We've been waiting for you. Brielle didn't respond. Logan grinned. Thought we'd give you a proper Elmswood welcome. Tara added, you know, since you never got yours. Muffled laughter came from a few students on the sidelines. Phones were already up, recording. The crowd watched like they were about to witness a performance. Logan stepped closer, trying to provoke her. What's wrong? You gonna cry now? Still, Brielle didn't move. She slowly placed her backpack on the ground. Her fingers tightened slightly as they left the strap. And then she exploded into motion. Before Brett could blink, Brielle turned and drove her elbow into his ribs with brutal precision. The sound he made wasn't a yell, it was the choking gasp of someone whose lungs had just been emptied. He dropped. Logan rushed her, but she moved faster. She ducked low, swept her leg around, and caught his ankles clean. His feet flew out from under him, and he slammed face-first into the pavement with a sickening crack that made even the onlookers flinch. Tara screamed and lunged, her hand flying toward Brielle's face in a wide, clumsy arc. But Brielle's arm shot up, catching Tara's wrist mid-air, holding it in place with terrifying calm. Don't, Brielle said. Her voice was flat. Cold. Unshaken. Tara froze. For a long second, the two stared at each other, Tara wide-eyed and trembling, Brielle calm and steady. Then Tara stumbled backward. She wasn't just backing off. She was retreating. Brielle turned her back on them, picked up her backpack, slung it over her shoulder, and walked off. Like nothing happened. No yelling. No bragging. No drama. Just quiet power. Behind her, phones were still recording. One video hit social media within minutes. By nightfall, it had 70,000 views and counting. Captions like "New girl body slams school bullies" and "Elmswood's queen now" spread like wildfire. The comments sections exploded. This girl's a legend. Logan got folded like laundry face with tears of joy. Protect Brielle at all costs. At school the next week, everything changed. Logan didn't speak to her again. Brett avoided eye contact completely. Tara tried to play it cool, pretending nothing had happened, but the tremble in her voice when Brielle walked by betrayed her. The crown had been broken. And Brielle? She walked the halls with the same quiet calm. But now, everyone made way for her. By Saturday morning, Brielle Davis was a name everyone in Elmswood knew, even people who didn't go to Northbridge High. She wasn't just the new girl anymore. She was the girl. Her fight outside the bike racks had exploded on TikTok, Instagram Reels, even Facebook for the town's adults who still used it. The videos had been edited into slow-motion highlights, with dramatic music and captions like "This ain't Atlanta no more," but she brought Atlanta with her. One video zoomed in on her sweeping Logan off his feet and added the sound of a collapsing building. The comments were endless. That girl's got hands. She's like a ninja. Where'd she learn to fight like that? Northbridge High got a new sheriff. But while the internet went wild, Brielle stayed off it. She didn't post. Didn't gloat. Didn't even mention the incident to her mom, who had no clue what had happened at school. Instead, she did laundry, listened to music, and helped her mom meal prep for the week. When Mia showed up that afternoon with wide eyes and a phone full of viral clips, Brielle just smiled like it was old news. "Girl," Mia said, flopping onto her bed, "you're literally trending." Like, trending. Elmswood's never had a fight like that. And you just won. Not just the fight. The school. Brielle shrugged, folding a shirt. "It's not a game to me." Mia tilted her head. "So, are you gonna tell me now?" Brielle hesitated. Then she sat down across from Mia, elbows on her knees, eyes steady. "You remember how people said I boxed back in Atlanta?" she asked. "Yeah. Everyone's been talking. MMA, street fights, even some dude said you trained with the FBI," Mia grinned. Brielle laughed softly. "Not the FBI. But yeah, I trained. Since I was 6. Mia's smile dropped. 6? Brielle nodded. "My dad runs a gym in Atlanta strictly for women. Self-defense, boxing, Krav Maga, jiu-jitsu. Everything. My mom helped start it too, after my cousin got hurt at a college party." No one believed her. "Cops didn't do anything. So my family stopped waiting for protection and learned how to protect ourselves." Mia's eyes softened. "Your cousin, she okay?" "She's healing," Brielle said quietly. "But it changed everything. I made a promise to myself when I was 11. I said I'd never let anyone make me feel powerless. Not again. Not ever." Mia sat in silence for a moment. "So that day, at the bike racks, that wasn't the first time." "No," Brielle said. "But I don't fight unless I have to. I'm not here to show off. Elmswood might be quiet on the surface, but danger hides everywhere. I'd rather be ready than afraid." Mia looked at her with new respect, not the kind you give someone because they're popular, but the kind you give someone because they've earned it. And back at school, Brielle's quiet strength began to shift the social landscape in real time. The crown was crumbling. Brett didn't come back to school until Tuesday, and when he did, he moved slower than usual. Rumor had it he had a cracked rib. He didn't speak a word to anyone in the hallways. Tara deleted all her social media accounts after one too many memes used her frozen face and the caption, "Don't mess with Brielle." She barely spoke in class. And Logan? Suspended. For inciting violence, the principal said. Word was, his parents were furious, but not at the school. At him. The video was too public, too viral, too humiliating. No amount of charm could undo that fall. By Thursday, the tables had turned, literally. At lunch, Brielle sat at her usual spot, alone for just a moment. Then Mia joined her. Then a few others trickled in, students who had once laughed at her or ignored her completely. A soccer player. A girl from drama club. Even two of the freshmen who had filmed the fight asked if they could sit nearby. Sure, Brielle said, offering a simple nod. She didn't smile wide. She didn't gloat. She allowed them in. And somehow, that was more powerful than any speech or post. The once dreaded table, the one the Crown had declared theirs, now sat nearly empty. People weren't just avoiding Logan. They were gravitating toward Brielle. Not because she was violent. Because she stood her ground. Because she chose silence with strength. Because she fought only when it mattered. That week, teachers began to treat her differently too. Coach Ross, who had once ignored the bullying in gym, stopped her after class. I heard what happened, he said. I should have stepped in sooner. Brielle raised an eyebrow. But you didn't. Coach looked ashamed. You have more control than most adults I know. Just, keep doing what you're doing. She walked away without replying. She didn't need approval. She didn't need validation. She had something better: respect, earned the hard way. That night, Mia texted her. "You're not just the new girl anymore. You're the one who changed everything." Brielle stared at the message for a long time. Then she replied. "I didn't change anything. They did. I just reminded them not to forget who I am." Monday morning came with a strange stillness in the air, like the calm after a storm. But underneath the quiet hum of students arriving, everyone at Northbridge High knew things weren't the same anymore. And neither was Brielle. When she walked through the school's front doors, heads turned, not with mockery or malice, but with quiet respect. Some students nodded at her like an unspoken thank you. Others simply stepped aside, making room as if her presence commanded it. Even the teachers seemed to notice. Mr. Alvarez, her English teacher who had barely acknowledged her before, greeted her with a genuine smile. "Good morning, Brielle. Glad to see you." "Morning," she said simply, sliding into her seat without fuss. She didn't strut. She didn't act like she owned the place. But in many ways, she kind of did. At lunch, she returned to her usual table, now filled with a steady circle of students. Mia sat beside her, as always, offering half of her cookie and asking about Brielle's playlist like nothing had changed. But something had. Not just around her, inside her. Brielle wasn't trying to hide anymore. She wasn't shrinking to fit in. She didn't need to be invisible. She didn't have to say much to be heard. The silence she carried now was different. It wasn't out of fear. It was strength. From across the cafeteria, Logan had returned too. He sat in the far corner with Brett and a couple of new hangers-on, but the old energy was gone. No more laughter booming across the room. No sly comments. No ownership. Just silence and occasional side glances he hoped Brielle wouldn't catch. But she did. She saw the way his shoulders slumped, the bruises barely faded from his pride. She didn't hate him. Not really. She just didn't care anymore. And that was worse for him. Mia leaned in close and whispered, "So, do you feel like you won?" Brielle looked around. The cafeteria, once filled with invisible walls and silent rules, now felt a little more free. The crown's reign was over. People were sitting where they wanted. Talking to who they liked. The fear that used to linger in the halls had lifted. She looked down at her lunch tray, then back up at Mia with a small, thoughtful smile. "Winning's not about the fight," she said. "It's about showing them I won't break. That none of us have to." Mia nodded, letting that sit between them. Across the school, something deeper had started to shift. It wasn't just that people respected Brielle. It was that they started looking at everyone a little differently. Some of the quiet kids who used to eat alone found themselves invited into new conversations. A student in a wheelchair, usually ignored, was asked to join a study group. Even teachers began paying more attention to dynamics they used to overlook. It wasn't perfect. Tara tried to slip back into her old social circles, but most people kept their distance. Logan still acted like he had something to prove, but the fear he once inspired had dried up. His swagger didn't carry weight anymore. His words rang hollow. And Brett? He kept his head down in class, focused more on notes than mockery. Word was, his parents had signed him up for anger management and community service. He didn't speak to Brielle, but he held the door open for her once after science class. She gave him a nod. That was enough. One day in gym, Coach Ross called Brielle aside. "I heard you used to train," he said cautiously. Brielle raised an eyebrow. "Yeah?" He hesitated, then handed her a flyer. "We're starting a self-defense club. After school. Thought maybe you'd want to help lead it." She looked at the paper. Bold letters read, "Empower, self-defense for all." Underneath was a note that read, "Open to everyone." Brielle looked back at the coach, surprised. You think they'll show up? She asked. I think they already look up to you, he said. Might as well give them something real to believe in. She took the flyer and tucked it into her notebook. Maybe Elmswood wasn't so quiet after all. Maybe there was something worth building here. That night, Mia and Brielle sat on Brielle's porch under a sky full of stars. You miss Atlanta? Mia asked. Sometimes, Brielle said, sipping from her bottle of sweet tea. But, maybe this town needed me more than I needed it. They laughed, but there was truth behind the words. What started as survival had turned into something bigger. Brielle didn't just defend herself. She changed the space around her. She reminded people that strength didn't always have to be loud. That silence could be powerful. That kindness could be fierce. And that bullies? They only win when you believe you're alone. But Brielle had proven otherwise. The next day, a new girl arrived in the middle of second period. Nervous. Eyes low. Trying not to be noticed. The teacher asked her to introduce herself. I'm Samira, she mumbled. Just moved from Detroit. She scanned the classroom, unsure where to sit. Brielle tapped the empty seat next to her and offered a small smile. Samira sat down without a word. But her shoulders relaxed. Because even though she didn't know it yet, she just sat next to the quiet storm of Elmswood. The girl no one saw coming. The girl who reminded everyone. Never judge the quiet girl. You never know what kind of storm she's hiding. Brielle didn't just stand up for herself, she changed the rules of the game. She reminded everyone that strength doesn't come from popularity, money, or how loud you are. It comes from knowing your worth, staying calm under pressure, and never letting others define who you are. The truth is, there are Brielles everywhere, people who've been underestimated, pushed around, or silenced. But the moment you stop hiding who you are and stand your ground, you become unstoppable. This isn't just a story about a fight, it's a reminder. You never know who you're messing with. If this story gave you chills or made you think twice about judging someone by how they look or act, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. What would you have done if you were in Brielle's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, we read every one. And remember, stay strong, stay real, and don't mess with the quiet ones. This is Hidden Realities, where the truth always comes out. They'll see you in the next episode.